This is Now Africa 24. It began with a message that wasn't supposed to exist. A single encrypted notice was sent to Ouagadougou through a back channel typically reserved for counter-terror operations and emergency intelligence sharing.
There was no greeting, no preface, just one line requesting provisional technical access to the national data infrastructure. This request was not for data mining. It was not a cybersecurity audit. They wanted the core, the backbone of every digital system Burkina Faso had built over the past 2 years. Inside the presidential compound, the reaction was immediate but measured. No shouting, no panic, just a quiet, collective understanding. If a foreign power asks for access to your data center, they are not trying to help. They are trying to see you. And sometimes, seeing is the first step toward controlling. The request did not come from a tech company. It came from a joint task group bearing the signatures of Washington and Tel Aviv, two governments that rarely share operational tools unless the stakes are extraordinary. What made it stranger was the timing. Burkina Faso had just completed Phase 2 of its sovereign data program, a project specifically designed to remove foreign dependencies from its mineral, energy, and administrative networks. And the moment that independence went live, the request arrived. Clean, polite, surgical. But everyone in the room felt the same cold truth. This was not technical assistance. This was the opening move in a larger game, and Burkina Faso had just been marked as the next battleground. The real story, however, did not start with a request. It began long before, in the markets. When global conflicts intensified in the Middle East, oil prices spiked. Gold reached levels analysts hadn't seen in decades. Currencies wavered. Supply chains stretched thin. In Washington and Tel Aviv, one conclusion began to solidify. The world was becoming unstable once again. Whoever held clarity over minerals would hold leverage. And that clarity does not come from the mines. It comes from the data. Production logs, export volumes, refinery outputs, energy consumption at extraction sites, satellite signatures of new drilling, algorithmic forecasts buried inside national databases. All of this forms the map of a nation's resource power. And in a crisis, the map is more valuable than the minerals themselves. Burkina Faso had unknowingly moved into this battlefield when it launched its sovereign data program. A structural shift, quiet but profound. For decades, West African states had relied on foreign servers, foreign cloud services, and foreign cybersecurity teams. It was not malicious. It was dependence engineered slowly over time. But Traoré broke the pattern. He began redirecting ministries away from Western digital ecosystems. He consolidated resource data onto internal servers. He commissioned a new encrypted backbone, bypassing American and European routing entirely. And he introduced a simple rule: no external audit without national supervision. That decision alone drew attention. Washington analysts flagged Burkina Faso as digitally opaque. Israeli cyber teams assessed the Sahel shift as a strategic blind spot. French advisors expressed concern over reduced access to operational intelligence. Their statements appeared mild on the surface, but underneath lay weighty implications. Burkina's new autonomy was not a technical upgrade. It was a blackout. Because once a country protects its mineral data, foreign powers lose the ability to predict its behavior. No prediction means no preemptive action, no leverage, no advantage. The interest intensified when internal reports suggested Burkina Faso was increasing production in gold and uranium fields while refusing to publish granular statistics. Nothing unlawful, nothing suspicious, but enough to unsettle those who rely on knowing everything before it happens. After years of influence, visibility, and access, Burkina Faso had suddenly and deliberately gone quiet. And in geopolitics, silence is rarely neutral. It is either weakness or preparation. Washington and Tel Aviv needed to know which one it was. That is why the request for technical access was sent. It was not surveillance. It was not oversight. It was a diagnostic probe, a way to test how far Burkina Faso's sovereignty actually extended and whether the country's independence was symbolic or real. And the answer they received, in the form of a cold refusal, changed everything that followed. The request was only the first signal. More followed, slowly, quietly, deliberately. At first they arrived as technical proposals. A U.S. agency suggested a joint cybersecurity cooperation framework. An Israeli cyber team offered to benchmark vulnerabilities inside Burkina Faso's mining networks. A European digital consortium proposed a transparency program for Sahelian resource databases. Each used different wording, but all served the same purpose: visibility. Direct or indirect, it did not matter. Inside Ouagadougou, analysts immediately recognized the pattern. Every proposal targeted one-point access to the back end of Burkina Faso's data infrastructure. Then the messaging shifted. Western think tanks published assessments implying that Burkina's closed data posture was destabilizing investment climates. A senior diplomat in Paris described Burkina Faso's digital reforms as concerning. An American panelist warned that opaque mineral data creates global market vulnerabilities. None of these statements were coincidental. They were probes, not technical, but political. A French energy advisor made a private remark that reached the presidency. Without shared data, we cannot coordinate extraction interests across the region. Coordinate, a polite word for influence. Meanwhile, Israel's interest intensified due to uranium. Not because of the volumes, but because of the silence. Uranium is sensitive. A country that stops reporting its uranium metrics becomes a security concern for nations that rely on predictive intelligence. Burkina Faso's sovereign data architecture had just cut off those predictive channels. By this point, the pressure was not overt. Not yet, but the perimeter was tightening. A U.S. congressional report proposed linking mineral agreements to data compliance standards. A European Development Bank quietly paused a funding review for a Sahel energy corridor. Two consulting firms recommended rerouting corporate technology investments away from Burkina Faso until governance clarity improved. Individually, these moves seemed small and inconsequential. Collectively, they were unmistakable. Burkina Faso was being pushed, not by a single actor, but by a coordinated atmosphere. A closed-door meeting was held. No phones, no laptops, no external advisors. The conclusion was stark. They are preparing a case. Not a legal case. A justification. For what? No one knew yet. But a confidential communiqué from Paris provided the missing piece. A French official hinted that if Burkina cooperated on data transparency, companies linked to France were prepared to support the modernization of the Essakane gold complex. Support, a polite word, this time for access. It became clear. The pressure campaign was not improvised. It was coordinated, step by step, moving toward something larger. And when Traoré refused every proposal, the next phase began. The phase that would later be known as the digital embargo. Traoré did not hesitate. The request for access, the probes, the proposals, the pressure, all received the same response, delivered through a diplomatic channel. Burkina Faso does not grant external access to sovereign data. No explanation, no apology, no softening, just a closed door. Washington received the message first. Tel Aviv received it minutes later. Paris, already monitoring the exchange, required no briefing. Inside a secure room in the U.S. Capitol, a classified meeting convened, not with diplomats, but with analysts, defense contractors, and cyber policy officials. The agenda was direct. Assess Burkina Faso as a digital risk. The term digital risk was deliberate. It is the label applied when a nation refuses visibility in a sector the U.S. considers strategically relevant. And when a country becomes a digital risk, the next step is almost always containment. Israel joined the discussion through a secure line, not to participate, but to advise. Their concern was uranium, not because Burkina produced large quantities, but because Israel's security doctrine requires predictive awareness across all uranium-producing regions. Burkina's silence disrupted that model. Then the French angle surfaced. France had been losing influence in the Sahel for years. Every refusal from Traoré, every declaration of sovereignty, pushed Paris further out of a region it once controlled with ease. For French strategic planners, Burkina Faso's sovereign data program posed another threat. Without access to gold output data, French industry lost negotiating leverage over West African supply lines. The three interests, American, Israeli, and French, began to converge. Not officially, not publicly, but structurally. Washington wanted mineral prediction. Israel wanted uranium visibility. France wanted influence in gold logistics. And all three wanted one thing Burkina Faso refused to provide: access. During this convergence, a senior U.S. official phrased it quietly. If cooperation cannot be obtained voluntarily, alternative pressure instruments must be considered. Alternative pressure instruments is a coded phrase in policy circles. It does not mean sanctions. It means restrictions, targeted, technical, strategic. The Israelis refined it. The French supported it privately. By the end of the meeting, an outline existed: a coordinated, multi-layered restriction targeting Burkina Faso's technological capacity. Not on paper, not in any treaty, just a shared understanding. The name assigned unofficially inside a classified memo was simple: digital embargo, a method to squeeze a nation without declaring conflict. A method to break a firewall without touching it. A method to remind a sovereign country that its autonomy has limits. At least that was the intention. But in Ouagadougou, Traoré was already preparing the next phase long before the embargo reached the planning table. The embargo did not arrive as a public declaration. It arrived as interruptions, small at first. A mining analytics platform Burkina Faso had used for years suddenly displayed a notice: service temporarily restricted due to policy compliance review. No explanation. No timeline. Hours later, a European energy optimization tool returned a similar message. Then, a cloud-based geological imaging API failed to authenticate Burkina Faso's credentials. The pattern was unmistakable. Each restriction targeted a different sector: mining, energy, cybersecurity, but all followed the same logic: limit Burkina Faso's ability to operate its digital infrastructure. Slowly, quietly. Deny nothing. Admit nothing. By the third day, 2 international suppliers paused the shipment of specialized processors used in Burkina Faso's refining and mineral mapping systems. Not cancelled. Paused. A bureaucratic term masking a strategic action. Ministers briefed Traoré. The perimeter is tightening, but the most significant pressure did not come from technology companies. It came from the financial sector. A European Development Bank postponed a review for a Sahel energy partnership, citing data alignment concerns. A North American investment group paused disbursement on an infrastructure loan, requesting updated transparency frameworks. A consortium of gold industry auditors announced a new requirement: real-time reporting of mineral flows. None of these actors coordinated with each other. They didn't need to. The atmosphere had been engineered. Burkina Faso was now officially classified, informally but effectively, as a high-risk digital jurisdiction. Inside the presidency, the impact assessment was stark. If unchallenged, the embargo could slow mineral production forecasts, limit access to technical components, isolate Burkina from key analytical tools, and reduce the country's negotiating leverage. But Traoré did not react with alarm. He reacted with calculation. Because what the outside world did not know, what no intelligence service had fully detected, was that Burkina had been preparing for this scenario long before the first restriction appeared. 14 months earlier, a small team of engineers, cryptographers, and military cyber analysts had been working on a classified project buried inside the Ministry of Digital Transition. Its purpose was simple but ambitious: design a data network independent of Western infrastructure, immune to foreign audits, capable of sustaining national operations even under full digital isolation. The project's name, known only within the highest chambers of government, was AES Data Shield. While the embargo tightened from the outside, the first operational components of the shield were quietly activated inside Burkina Faso's secure data centers. The digital pressure was real, but so was the countermeasure. Burkina had been cornered, but it was not unprepared. The escalation began on a Tuesday morning. A routine diagnostic sweep inside Burkina Faso's primary data center detected unusual inbound traffic patterns. Not an attack, but a mapping attempt. Someone outside the country was scanning for open protocols, legacy ports, or unpatched gateways. The digital equivalent of checking every door in a building to see which one might open. The team reported it immediately. Traoré did not call a meeting. He issued a single order: activate Phase 1. Phase 1 referred to a sealed package of directives under the AES Data Shield program, a project most government ministries had never heard of. Only a select group inside the digital defense and intelligence apparatus knew the full scope. Activation changed everything. First, the national data backbone switched routing protocols. Traffic that had relied on mixed infrastructure, part African, part European, was rerouted through a fully African mesh. Not perfect, not fast, but sovereign. Second, all mineral production logs migrated to isolated local servers, disconnected from international networks. This single step blocked foreign agencies from accessing indirect telemetry, a method often used to estimate extraction volumes based on server behavior. Third, 3 secured communication nodes, one in Ouagadougou, one near Kaya at a military site in the north, were synced through an encrypted protocol created internally by Sahel engineers. No Western cryptography. No vendor keys. Each of these actions sent a clear signal. Burkina Faso was walling off its data permanently. But the most significant response was invisible. AES engineers flipped a switch on a system known internally as Sentinel Layer. It monitored unusual foreign digital activity and rerouted suspicious patterns into a sandbox environment, a closed loop designed to waste attackers' time without revealing anything. Within hours, Sentinel Layer recorded 5 new mapping attempts from 3 different regions: Western Europe, the U.S. East Coast, and a Middle Eastern proxy network. All failed. All were contained. Inside Washington, an internal memo flagged an unexpected development. Burkina Faso has entered fortified data mode, visibility severely reduced. In Tel Aviv, analysts reached the same conclusion. For the first time, they could not see inside Burkina Faso's uranium sector, not even through indirect indicators. Paris received its own shock. The digital channels used for monitoring gold logistics no longer returned predictable signals. AES Data Shield had worked. But the pressure campaign did not stop. It intensified, because when a nation blocks access, external powers rarely retreat. They escalate, and that escalation was about to begin. The first direct confrontation did not come through diplomats. It came through code. At 2:17 local time, Burkina Faso's monitoring team detected a sudden surge of coordinated traffic originating from multiple jurisdictions. Not a denial of service wave, not ransomware. Structured, layered, precision-timed. The attack targeted 3 points simultaneously: the National Data Registry, the encrypted logistics server for gold transport, and the uranium oversight module managed by the Ministry of Energy. The goal was not destruction, it was penetration. Someone wanted to see inside. Sentinel Layer reacted instantly, isolating the intrusion and diverting it into a controlled sandbox. Inside the sandbox, the attackers' tools behaved as if they were interacting with real systems. But every packet they sent was recorded. By morning, Burkina Faso's analysts had mapped the fingerprints of each component. One resembled a European contractor known for cyber intelligence partnerships. Another matched a tool set previously associated with a U.S. subcontractor. A third showed characteristics common in Middle Eastern proxy networks tied to Israel's external operations. No attribution was announced. None was necessary internally. This was the escalation. Within hours, Traoré called a closed-door briefing. No cameras, no official minutes, just the core circle of digital and intelligence staff. The assessment was clear. They tested our wall. They failed. They will try again. What followed next changed the tone of the entire crisis. Traoré authorized AES Data Shield Phase 2. Phase 2 cut all non-essential foreign integrations from government networks. Every analytical tool relying on Western servers was halted. Every cloud-based dependency replaced with internal substitutes. Offline redundancies were activated, something no Sahel state had ever attempted at this scale. The message was unmistakable. Burkina Faso was no longer reacting. It was taking control. Later that afternoon, Traoré delivered a short address broadcast to the nation. Calm, measured, firm. No accusations. No inflammatory language. Just one line that resonated beyond the capital. Border sovereignty is not a request. It is a fact. The statement circulated across diplomatic networks within minutes. For the first time since the crisis began, pressure began shifting in the opposite direction. Washington instructed its embassy to monitor but avoid escalation. Israel classified its briefings on the Sahel as sensitive. France reduced its media commentary after a leak suggested they had quietly played a role in urging technical restrictions. None of the three powers wanted a public confrontation with a country now clearly capable of resisting. For Burkina Faso, the confrontation revealed a simple truth. The embargo was not weakening the nation. It was sharpening its resolve, and the world was forced to recalibrate. When the digital embargo failed to fracture Burkina Faso's infrastructure, the narrative shifted. Outside observers framed the episode as a technical disagreement, a misunderstanding, a dispute over data protocols. But inside diplomatic circles, the assessment was more candid. Africa has begun sealing its information borders. This is the beginning of a structural realignment. What happened was not simply a standoff between Burkina Faso and three foreign powers. It was a demonstration of how the global order reacts when a smaller nation chooses to protect something more powerful than gold or uranium. It's information sovereignty. For decades, resource influence followed a predictable model. Control the mines, control the output, control the state. The modern model is different. Control the data, and you control the future of the resource. That is why the digital embargo was never about technology. It was about prediction, the ability of powerful nations to forecast, shape, and preempt the decisions of a country like Burkina Faso. Without access to data, they lose leverage in negotiations, visibility over mineral flows, insight into production, advanced warning of new alliances, and strategic understanding of Africa's next moves. That loss of visibility is what triggered the panic. Not the gold, not the uranium, just the silence. The soft conspiracy interpretation emerging among analysts is simple. France may have been the quiet instigator. Not designing the embargo, but nudging it forward. Their motive is logical. Losing Essakane and the surrounding gold sector meant losing long-term influence in a region Paris once considered strategic depth. Pushing the U.S. and Israel into a harder stance benefited them. as long as their role remained invisible. Whether this influence was active or passive remains unconfirmed. But the alignment of outcomes was too neat to ignore. Another theory circulating among African observers suggests the digital embargo was a test case, a trial to see how far a coordinated technological restriction could pressure a sovereign African state without triggering diplomatic fallout. By that measure, the result was unexpected. Burkina Faso did not fracture. It consolidated. It exposed how dependent foreign actors had become on the assumption that African resource systems would always remain open to external scrutiny. The crisis concluded with a quiet but decisive shift. Burkina had proven that a Sahel state could operate outside Western digital oversight and still stand. In policy terms, this is not a victory. It is a precedent, a warning to some, an inspiration to others, and a signal that the next geopolitical contest in Africa will not be fought over territory or ideology, but over who controls the flow of information that defines them.